right, welcome to this episode of BPI Business and Politics Inside. I'm Chris Phillips, and we're here today with Hunter Sadler. Hunter is running for the House of Representatives, District 75 in the state of Arkansas. Welcome, Hunter.
Good to be with you.
Glad you're here. Hey, I want to jump right in and just have at it. I want you to tell me what made you decide now's the time and you wanted to, that this was the place that you wanted to be.
Yeah, no, hi, I'm Hunter. I'm from West Little Rock. Two homes I grew up in got cut out of the district and redistricting, but I am from West Little Rock. I lived generally west of 430 the majority of my life. Know the issue very well. I remember it all when it was trees. A lot of the apartment complexes and a lot of the buildings done the last 20 years. Basically lived in that area my entire life, minus when I was in college and grad school and then running around the Army. I've just chosen to stay in that part of Little Rock. It's just always felt like home to me, and I feel like I have a lot in common with everyone who kind of lives over there, so just kind of stayed out there. I went to Arkansas State University for college back when they were really good at football, and we were winning conference championships every year. And then went to grad school there, and then during an internship, I got an idea to join the Army, so joined the Army National Guard in December of 2016, where I've served since as a logistics officer in the 39th Infantry Brigade Combat Team. Deployed overseas with them once to Europe to go train the Ukrainian army in the midst of their initial counterattack against the Russians later on in 2023. So it was a very exciting time to be over there and learned a lot about leadership, the importance of who your leaders are, the decisions that they make, and how they arrived at them, just because of, in my view, leadership failures by previous military and administrative officials allowing the Ukraine situation to go the way it did. So you definitely learn a lot about the mistakes that people can make and the consequences they have when you're talking to 70-year-old draftees, training them on M16s that were thrown in a bunker during the Vietnam era, so we can try and train them how to fight when they went from literally being on the street a week ago. So learned a lot from that aspect of being in the military, and the importance of who your leaders are and what decisions that they can do that they can affect you, and a lot of things that people worry about affecting them that don't, and things they don't even think about that do, which is kind of a version of my canned rant about the importance of local leadership, and we'll get into that here. But yeah, so that's more or less me in a nutshell, I guess. I've worked for Congressman French Hill for the last 6 years and some change. Started out as a field rep, and then over time just became the casework guru, and I wound up with a cool title. It basically means I oversee the casework program. So all the agencies, the federal government, whether it's the IRS, Social Security, Office of Personnel Management, some of the VA, a little bit of everything. I've done it by now. It's really, really great fighting with the IRS and trying to get people's money back for them and stalled tax refunds, and it's usually for some arbitrary reason. Up until recently, the IRS system ran on MS-DOS.
Oh, wow.
That old fossil. So it's like they actually, there's a true story. They showed me on their computer system what they would look at when they were talking to me on the phone. I was like, I think that's the Oregon Trail, but that's...
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it was just a very eye-opening thing. They've modernized some of their systems since. But anyway, I've been doing that sort of thing for the last 6 years, fighting for people, learning how these systems work and how they integrate with lower levels of government, such as the state, and kind of getting the behind-the-curtain view of how government doesn't work. And there's been some cases in which you learn some good things about how the whole process works too. So haven't touched a lot of the legislative side, just a lot of the non-political, nonpartisan, take people's comments and pass them on to the congressman and working on case for federal agencies. So
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a heck of a background. But how old are you?
I'm 32. I don't look it at all.
Yeah.
Most people usually, whenever I'm fresh off of a drill weekend, people will go, so are you done with college? And then whenever I'm right before a drill and my facial hair is growing a little bit, I at least look 25. So
right.
Yeah, no,
But even at 32, that's a great, that's a great background. I mean, for where you've been and what you've done.
Yeah, no, I've jammed a lot into 32 years. Sort of the why I'm running now thing. I obviously have a lot of life left to live, God willing. My wife and I have been married since November of 2021. We had a little baby girl last year. Her name's Elizabeth. We call her Elle, but the government knows her as Elizabeth.
Right.
She just turned 10 months old. This is also it sounds corny, but it actually has the benefit of being true. But we're sitting there in the hospital on her birthday, seeing her for the first time and holding her for the first time, something I thought about for months on end. What's she gonna look like? What's she gonna be like? All these things. And it's finally all there in one package, this tiny snoozing little 30-minute old creature. And I'm looking down at her and it changed my perspective and wiring of everything almost instantaneously the first time I looked at her, and even more so when she looked at me for the first time. We sort of locked eyes. Is like I can wait forever turned into no, we have to do it right now.
Yeah.
And it sounds corny. It just sounds like something someone would make
No,
up.
not
But
if you're a dad. I
yeah,
don't think
but
so.
it's especially a dad of a little girl.
Right.
From
That's yeah.
I don't have a son. Maybe we'll see one of these days. But as the father of, in my opinion, the cutest little girl that there ever
Mhm.
was, it rewired sort of everything about we have to fix everything that I've complained about and Monday morning quarterbacked about in government forever. Like, we'll just leave it to those folks. And people would always ask me, if you thought about running? He's like, sure, I thought about it, but I'm not, in the position to want to do that right now. That wasn't necessarily the goal either. It's not like I got into politics thinking I was going to be God's gift to Arkansas and one day a member of the legislature. It was just kind of where my career path took me by a really long string of coincidences and almost accidents is how I got there. That's a whole different
Yeah.
pot on its own. But that was kind of like the why now. It's like the national environment's not great for Republicans. If we're being honest with ourselves, things are trending further and further away from the party that I'm more closely aligned with. But it's just the time became very much we have to go now, right now, because we don't fix these things that are wrong with the state and our local government right now, then they won't be fixed by the time my daughter's old enough to start experiencing some of the downfalls of us not fixing them. So it was literally just the middle of afternoon, right before the tornadoes blew through in early April, like literally later that afternoon. It's like just an instant, like, oh. And then the opportunity came up. People asked me again. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll think about it, and thought about it some more. And now here we are. Now I'm running. So
Yeah. Well, yeah. Awesome. So you graduated from ASU. Were you a red wolf or an Indian?
I was a Red Wolf. So they made
Yeah.
the transition in the late
Yeah.
2000s. I showed up in 2011 when Hugh Freeze was the head coach, and then had Malzahn and Harsin. My 3 years in undergrad, I graduated a year early. Then we had the long run with Blake Anderson. So yeah, had some really good
Yeah.
football, but it was all Red Wolves. I had
Yeah.
a buddy of mine that was a super senior, or victory lapper as he called himself. We're still friends now, but he was a fifth-year senior when I was a freshman. He was in the last class of Indians. It was all very recent memory of having Indian stuff and the logo and the merchandise of my Indian name is Red Wolf and all that recent transition stuff. So that was a very interesting time to be on campus.
Right. So you mentioned the party pressure and the things that are going on there within the party. How would you balance that with what the citizens of your district want from you?
Well, I would note that the party doesn't elect these officials. You're not anointed by the party per se. You run as a member of a party. So the people of West Little Rock are going to decide whether they continue with their current representative or they switch over to me, because it's at this point in time a two-person race. So the people are infinitely what's more important, because they're end consumer of all the product we do or don't create in the Capitol in the form of legislation. So um, there's plenty of times where I've seen people get too beholden to worrying about what scorecard is going to say what about them, that they're not conservative enough, or you're not progressive enough fighting for the little people, or whatever it is. Both sides have this problem. And at the end of the day, the reason why they broke with that is because they had a very convincing argument from their constituent groups, or there's some intricacy in the way it was doing it that was going to impact just their constituency or disproportionately impact their constituency. So that's why we have 100 members in the House and 35 in the Senate, is you get the diversity of perspectives, and we don't all have to agree. You just have to get 51 votes. So I think it's important that people actually know their constituency, which is really hard for some of these rural guys that have like 5 counties in their district. But for us, it's all West Little Rock. We're all more or less, slightly above median income, mixture between public and private. Most have pretty good paying jobs. Some people not as much, splice in between, but it's a fairly homogenous district from what I've ever seen by the numbers. A lot of business owners, a lot of, higher end, like professionals, doctors, lawyers, nurses, so on and so forth. So knowing the people that live in West Little Rock that make up House District 75 is infinitely more important than, yeah, I'm registered as a Republican. The Republican Party doesn't vote on me per se. Even if
Right.
I win a primary at some point, they decide they want somebody else, they can have somebody else, and I'll go back to the House. And heck, I might even be better off for it, not having to stomach the leadership burden that comes with having one of these jobs. But the people are what's more important because they're the ones who actually cast the vote.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. It just doesn't always seem to go that way. Uh, the that seat that you're running for, District 75 in West Little Rock, after some redistricting in 2020, it was District 32 prior to
Right.
that, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, I was 32.
So that had primarily been a Republican held seat for the last number of years, and then
Right.
it recently flipped.
Right.
And you mentioned some of the issues within the party and things like that. Do you think that contributed to it? And your opponent is in there. Are you seeing
Yeah.
anything that she's doing that you'd like to see done different? Change.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just call out the elephant, no pun intended, in the room. It's Donald Trump is the reason why some of the stuff has changed. There's a select demographic of people, which happens to be a lot of people in West Little Rock, in my view, that generally would say they were an old style Republican, Bush era, whatever, but they're disgusted with something about Trump, whether it's they think tariffs are stupid, which I happen to fall into that camp, but not to this extent. Tariffs are stupid and they're messing up our trade, therefore my business. They think that he's a repulsive human being for whatever reason, because some of the stuff that's come out about him, he's mean, the mean tweets from the first, whatever it is. There's something so repulsive about him where they want to vote for anyone who has nothing to do with him. So they'll vote for Vice President Harris. They voted for Joe Biden. They voted for Secretary Clinton, so on and so forth. But they'll also vote Republican down ballot for people they don't view as part of the, MAGA sort of way of doing things, as evidenced by John Bozeman of French Hill won in West Little Rock in 2022. So I know there's a lot of propaganda out there about, oh, they're just MAGA rubber stamps. As someone who's worked for both of them, I assure you they're not. And people reward that. So by the numbers on a presidential year, which this is not, this is a midterm, it's pretty 50-50 because of who shows up to vote. In a midterm year, past data suggests that there are MAGA resistant traditional conservatives that will vote for what they view to be a mainstream Republican. That being said, in a general election, all sort of turns into a wash because there's a president at the top, but that's not the case this time around. So I think there's some level of demographic shifting. I think the parties have changed. You have a lot of higher education voters that are now Democrats that used to be Republicans or didn't vote at all. There's a lot of higher education households in West Little Rock, so it just kind of naturally follows that bend. But I think a lot of it is people want to see non-noisy small government that is fiscally conservative, and they don't think about it very often, rather than it being everywhere in their Facebook feed, being everywhere on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days, all over the local news. They want the government to not be an ever-present force in their lives. So will we ever get back to that point in time where you just kind of, the government's out there, who the president is, who the governor is, so on and so forth. But the way the environment has gone, because President Trump is such a polarizing figure, I think has sort of skewed the lines. They're not necessarily ideological. So in that vein, obviously I'm pretty connected to Congressman Hill. I think you can make that conclusion. And I don't really know too many issues on the state level we disagree on. So I'm in that old school Republican mold in the pre-Trump era about not trying to weaponize the government for getting my mean ends, but taking the teeth out of the thing so it can't do anything to anyone in the future. So broad statement, not, in every regard, but as a general statement, shrinking the government to where it's a non-intrusive force as much as humanly possible while still maintaining the public.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the part of your platform that you're running on is smaller government, lowering taxes
Right.
to spur economic growth. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so there's a thing out right now called Pathway to Zero. I believe it's Americans for Prosperity, kind of is the ones who did it. They crunched the numbers on it. It shows that there is a pathway to get to 0% income tax. Governor Sanders ran on it. People generally are supportive of not paying as much tax. They just need to see the numbers. I haven't gotten to the whole gist of all of it and reviewing and making sure all the numbers balance out on the accounting aspect of it. But the concept of responsibly taking our surplus every year and then using that to cut the income tax by whatever the proportions are, I am very supportive of because we're clearly over collecting. We don't need to invent new things for the government to do or find some slush fund for some powerful member. We need to just stop collecting that money because as the economy continues to grow and inflation changes and all the other things, we can collect less money. It creates more opportunities. The numbers all work out. We have yet to reach any sort of meaningful fiscal cliff with how Arkansas has started with cutting taxes. Just to show how far we've gone, it was 7% at the start of Governor Beebe's last legislative session. So that would have been what, 2018?
I don't remember, but
Yeah,
you're
2013 or
you're, you're
so.
close. I know that.
Yeah, somewhere in the early 2010s. And then they dropped it to 6.9%. They literally cut it by 0.1, but credit where it's due. And then over Governor Hutchinson's 8 years and then the current 3+ we've had of Governor Sanders, we've gotten it down into the high threes.
Wow.
So it's nearly been cut in half just in roughly a decade. And we've had no meaningful budget cliff that's coming up. I know people say that, we're still spending too much. There's people saying we're not spending enough, but we've shown you can cut the income tax responsibly over time with a plan and a mission and dedication to actually executing that goal. So I think income tax is easy. So the first time I paid franchise tax, it really ground my gears because it was an LLC that I put together to manage a rental home that ended up selling. And it's $150 just to have the permission slip, as I call it, from the government to
Right.
operate a business within its boundaries. I had a lot of time while I was deployed in between things to think about things. And I got really spun up about having to pay this franchise tax. And I thought about it. It's like if you're an Etsy producer, small business owner, you're doing a little arts and crafts thing as a side hustle, and your margin is $1 for everything you sell. In order to pay to Caesar what is owed to Caesar for the year, you have to sell 150 units of whatever your, trinkets
Right.
are.
Just
Before,
for the government to break even.
right, just to break even with selling up the government. That's before you even account for anything else. So is $150 a lot of money? No, but should we look at potentially carving out an exemption for small business defined by whatever we can come up with? Or, I mean, let's talk about eliminating altogether. What's it funding other than more government programs that, maybe are not a value add? I'm not sure where that particular tax goes to, but you can still use it as a sort of a pay for. You cut it out here and then replace its funding with another stream of revenue. So things like that, I call them the permission slip taxes.
Right.
Like, a hunting license, okay, fine. Like you have to pay whatever the amount is for the dual sportsman license now because it directly goes fee for service, Arkansas Game and Fish, so they can maintain the habitat. I'm contributing my part. Okay, fine. But there's plenty of things that are out there that are basically just paying the government a fee because they're requiring you to pay a fee.
Right.
And that's the stuff where you get nickel and dime. You stack enough nickels and dimes on top of each other, you eventually
Right.
have some dollars. So that sort of innovation and looking into getting rid of permission slip fees, as I call them, we can do that. We can walk and chew bubblegum and look at income tax reduction as well. It's not per se all going to the same pot. It's the same government at the end of the day. But all these things that become cost prohibitive for starting a small business and making entrepreneurs willing to take a try on things. I think we should really look into all that.
Absolutely. As a business owner, I can tell you it is very discouraging to that's one place where
Yeah.
we have to if you're licensed in anything, then you're paying that licensing agency some fee for that in addition to
Yeah.
your franchise tax, in addition to if you make any money, how much of it are you giving up,
Right.
and yeah, your overhead right off the top.
Yeah, and have you ever looked at the list of all the boards and commissions we have in the state of Arkansas that the governor can appoint you to?
No, I think I have at some point, but I couldn't recall, but there's a lot of them. I know
Yeah,
that.
there's quite a few of them. And I know why they existed at
Sure.
one point in time, but in a digital era in which we can get from one end of the state to the other, Little Rock to anywhere is 3 hours max, and we have the internet. You don't need as much, fiefdom control of stuff going on. I'm entertained trying to slash the number of those because what function are they serving other than you get to say you got appointed by the governor to some cool board?
Yeah.
And the sort of I rest my case on some of these boards is that you'll see the announcements and they go out. They just haven't been filled with
Right.
positions for years on end and nothing broke. So it's like, do we really need that many
Right.
members? Do we even need the board at all? Can it be consolidated with other ones? What function is this board actually serving? Because you pay your franchise tax, you pay the fee to the board in order to be licensed with them. You can just consolidate and streamline this process so it's less oppressive to people that are wanting to actually take a chance on something and be an entrepreneur as opposed to getting nickeled and dimed for literally anything in order to try and start a business.
Right. It's hard enough on its own,
Yeah.
without creating more difficulties for
Right.
people to jump through to do it. That's part of your platform, and I think that's probably pretty universal. Everyone would like to pay less taxes, I believe.
Yeah. Well, one other thing I just want to kind of throw
Yeah.
out there is that indexing of numbers through inflation is something that I think we should do. If an act was passed with a financial figure prior to the year 2000, just put a hard cut on it. We should review that number. The income tax, when it was first instituted in Arkansas, do you know what the top rate tax roughly was at the time?
No, tell me.
It's $30,000 was the top end before you started
Oh,
paying.
wow.
You know what that inflation adjusts to roughly?
What's that?
Over 400,000.
Wow.
So I'm going to make an assumption real quick. Do you make more than $30,000 a year?
Right.
So I think it's in the high 30s now, but
Right.
so everyone pays the highest tax rate in Arkansas. There effectively is no middle tax rate.
Yeah.
Because they've never changed the number since I want to say it was like 1927, 8, 9. It was pre World War II, being my point.
Yeah.
They never changed the number. So it's never been inflation adjusted that I've ever seen. So if you were to do that now and just re-snap the chalk line, so to speak, and I don't know, we'll put $100,000 and over pays the highest tax rate, you just cut the taxes of probably 2/3 of the state just by inflation adjusting the cut lines between
Oh.
the brackets.
Wow. Wow.
So
Wonder why no one's ever looked at that.
well, I think people have gotten so ideologically consumed, rightly, with eliminating tax altogether. So it's irrelevant. If everyone's at zero, it doesn't matter if you have graduated tax brackets or
Sure.
not, which, briefs well. But in the interim, as long as we're going to keep dropping taxes, obviously we're not going to do it overnight. There's no, sensible way to go about it without collapsing the budget. Make less people pay the higher tax rate. Whatever the fair, responsible number is, I don't know. But effectively, from my research on how they came up with the number that hasn't been inflation adjusted, it was like plantation owners.
Right.
And that was the list, like the uber rich
Right.
or who paid that top tax rate. And now it's nearly everyone because they never inflation adjusted the number. So
Wow.
it's the same with regulations. If it is an act that passed before the year 2000, let's look at it and see what it is and what its function it is. Can we modernize it? Can it be eliminated, or is it fine as it is? But let's at least look at all of the laws that are on their books.
Right. So many laws and ordinances, I believe, out there that I've seen in the past that are just antiquated.
Yeah, no, I mean, one of my favorite laws, they used to have this app on phones. It was like a weird law of the day app that I had on my iPhone 4 or whatever 15 years ago. And it would spit out funny laws from Arkansas. And it was something along the lines of you can't march 1,000 steer down Main Street in Little Rock.
Right.
So it's like 999 was fine, but that 1,000th one was the
way
one.
too many.
It's way too many. And it's like, and I'm sure that exists because some person did something they weren't supposed to,
Right.
and thus they came up with a retaliatory law. But it's those sort of things.
Right.
There's old things that are on the books that make the code of all of our laws in the state and the feds in particular just overburdened with random requirements that have been stapled together over time.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the exact number is with the Arkansas Constitution. Like a good solid number of those amendments are canceling out other amendments, but we keep
Yeah.
adding more. So I'm a big believer in we have enough already, unless it's some sort of new technology.
Something new.
Yeah,
Right.
something new, like, all the stuff with AI and all the wonderful things that might end up doing for us or against us. Unless it is something brand new, we should be in the mode of cutting and refining rather than coming up with new requirements. So,
Right.
I'm not going to say like a hard and fast ratio, like for every one, we're going to cut two because it's not
Right.
responsible to make a blanket.
As needed.
Yeah, it's
Right.
as needed, but let's at least look at it. Like,
Right.
I don't even know if you went down to the Capitol, if you could find somebody who's read every page of the Arkansas Code and then analyzed it for streamlining processes and everything like that.
Probably not for that purpose.
Yeah,
If they had, I would think we would see some of those things gone.
right. And I guess they're not too intrusive per se because they haven't showed up and someone hasn't complained about them. But there's also a lot of people that are out there not realizing that this is a state requirement, that they could be making a call to their local representation to make it go away or be substantively changed.
Right.
So just because the absence of noise, people complaining about it doesn't mean that the status quo is acceptable either.
Right.
So if I'm elected, after we get through that first session, I'm going to put a lot of things on interim study for how do we look into refining the code and shrink it. It should not take an entire forest worth of white pages to print on to have the entire book of Arkansas code out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, you it sound like you beyond. I mean, those are great ideas. I love them. But as I'm listening to you, you sound like experience. It's the only way I know to put it. Like I talk to candidates who are stepping out for their first time and running for their first public office, and maybe they have a lot of really good ideas, but maybe they're not realistic.
Yeah.
You given your leadership history with the military and your experience in John Bozeman's office and Congressman Hill's office. Um, yeah, you sound like you have experience.
Yeah, no, to clarify that, I was an intern for half a summer for Senator Bozeman's. That's the entire exposure directly working within the legislative process, directly boots on ground.
But that's more than most people have.
Right. It's more than most people. But the problem it is you then see behind the curtain, you can't unsee it.
Right.
So to kind of rewind to the top of what your question was, is I think I've worked for probably the two most oppressive bureaucracies, if we're not going to count the UN or the European Union, if we're just going to throw them out. The two most American oppressive bureaucracies, the Department of Defense or War, or whatever we're calling it, and the federal government at large, the non-DoD part. So there's all kinds of annual training requirements that we have to do as reserve members of the Army. It takes up half your time, and no one can tell you what the value add was, but nobody's gone through and slashed it. And I think Secretary Hegseth, in a lot of his stuff, right, wrong, or indifferent about him as a person or as a leader, has at least had this mentality of regulatory slashing and getting rid of requirements that no longer hold value or don't hold substantive value, that the warfighter has more time. So that level of innovation and going through and really looking at seeing ourselves and what do we actually need for these people. And I've seen the reduction in, annual trainings, which are basically death by PowerPoint for half a day every December. Um, that level of going through bureaucracies and what it can do to you and all the things. Like if you get in a zoning dispute with your local city, God help you. I mean,
Right.
if you think you're accepted from whatever and they, for whatever reason, and their lawyers and their infinite manpower, they not so fast, buddy, pay your permission slip so that you can build a greenhouse or something. Just arbitrary making up a story here. And there's no recourse for it because the bureaucracy is always going to win. It is always larger than you, the individual. The only way to beat it is to organize and get the rules themselves changed because you're never going to beat the rule book.
Right.
So, yeah, no, I'm unfortunately experienced. Like it should not take a member of Congress calling the IRS, saying, what is up with this person's tax return? It's been years. You've said you're auditing them. Every dollar of their principal that they're owed back out of their own money that is theirs, that is being refunded to them, is also accruing interest at some rate. I forget what it is. I once had a guy that had a very large refund because they forgot a decimal somewhere. We got him a 6-figure digit return and just interest on top of the principal balance because it had taken so long.
Wow. A
So-
6-digit return on interest alone.
Right. So every dollar you've probably paid in income tax
Right.
yourself
Right.
in the last decade, we'll just call it, probably went to pay this one guy's interest because the IRS did not get its act together and was so overcome with bureaucracy they could not operate efficiently. Like there's staffing shortages, sure, even more so now than back when the story occurred, however many years ago it was. But other agencies of the government have figured it out. Social Security, believe it or not, has it figured out to an extent. You can go on, you can program in, I'm this many years old. It knows exactly how much money you've, put aside, and it can forecast out into the future. It's like if you keep working at this amount of time, at this rate of pay, and you retire at age 67, you will get this much for the rest of your life. Like it can be done.
Right.
People just have to actually want to do.
Right.
And that's obviously the feds. It's not the same as the state, but there's still at levels of scale, similar problems on the state level
Sure.
or just a certain level of wanting to try and fix it might solve some of the problems. Like a lot of the discourse that we currently have over state sponsored education right now. I mean, you can hate the Learns Act if you want to. I personally don't. I think it's got a lot of good in some areas that might need some changes still. Was a shotgun blast into fixing the status quo because we are not providing a product worth having, thus creating the need for children to want to go elsewhere.
Let's try to do something
So let's
different.
do something.
Right.
A couple of my card carrying Democrat friends who remain nameless to protect the innocent said something sort of putting their two statements together into one, paraphrasing, but it's we had control of the government since Reconstruction. We didn't fix the problem. And by God, the Republicans are trying. So, obviously they don't agree with most of the stuff in the Learns Act. It was like, man, we could have fixed this for 150 years and we didn't. So this is the price of elections have consequences. Is everything Learns Act perfect? No, because the sponsors amended it themselves the next session. So there's always room for improvement. You have to be in that innovation mindset. But just accepting the status quo and letting the bureaucracy win because I have interest in the bureaucracy winning, or it's just too hard, or, whatever the reason might be, we can't be in that mindset in the current way of doing things. Arkansas is a growing state rather than a receding state, which it spent most of the 20th century being because of, changes in the landscape back then. So if we're going to keep being on the good side of the U-Haul moving index,
Hmm.
as they show every year, then we have to be willing to look at ourselves, realize what we're not good at and improve it so that people keep wanting to move.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also a lot of the time, the people who don't approve of things like the Learns Act, and I'm again just using that as an example, not things like that. A lot of the time, it's because they don't know entirely. They believe that it's taking away funds from the schools,
Yeah.
things that aren't really happening the way they believe it is. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I try not to repeat talking points too much, but these are grounded in fact. But first of all, my opponent voted no. So if she wants to explain to, student loan holding teacher from Arkansas State or UCA, the former teachers college, the top flight education from a state university, public university.
What did she vote no on?
She voted no on the Learns Act.
Okay.
And to my knowledge from talking to people who run around the Capitol, basically put up nothing of, changes to try and, tweak things. It's just resist, resist, resist. We can't have this. And got overwhelmingly defeated and has offered no alternatives to make public school better that I've seen or took effect since it happened. So it's like, all right, so we're going to vote no on this landscape changing Learns Act that takes the money that you and I pay in property taxes and creates the ability for us to use our own tax dollars to seek an alternative education and to get away from a school that is not teaching our children sufficiently, as evidenced by look how many schools have terrible literacy ratings. If you can't even learn to read, what's this rest of the school even doing?
What are we doing here?
What are we doing here? You can boil all of education down to two metrics of literacy rate. We'll call it 10th grade by the time of graduating, good enough for the Army and making the ASVAB, good enough for me. 10th
Right.
grade reading level by the time you graduate and ready to do something after college, whether that's having a robust education in trades and then going over to like Saline Technical or UAPTC across the river from here. Go do something to be productive or just have a plan. I don't know how you would measure that. So we'll just stick to something that's easily measurable. Like you had enough trade experience, you're connected with, an opportunity to become an electrician or an opportunity to become a CNA and get in the medical pipeline, auto body repair, all these things we don't have enough of. And everyone
Right.
agrees we don't have enough of, but the public school model is not set up for that. It's set up for Common Core, do the same 4 subjects, English, science, and math, the same things we've always been doing. And they can't even teach kids to read right. I don't remember what the most recent literacy rates in the Little Rock School District are, but I can tell you they're not great. West Little Rock, we're blessed to have really good schools. My daughter's a future Don Roberts student if we get things the way that we want them. We have good schools. There are teachers that are trying. There are administrators trying, but the product is not good as a general whole because we have too many F-rated schools and all these charters popping up everywhere, taking students away. And, I would counter the argument that you're taking money from public schools. Well, you no longer have the liability that came with the funding. So you don't need as much stuff to educate with. So your, expenditures are going down proportionally with whatever. And at the end of the day, it's a funding formula, not a spending formula.
Right.
every student has an X amount of dollars to go attached to head enrolled in school. How the school district spends it is entirely up to them. And clearly, the school districts are not being held accountable for how they're spending their money.
Right.
So teachers now make $50,000 a year. I think it's a good thing that we're, at the top of the nation paying our teachers. They get their student loans through public student loan forgiveness. We need more people staying in teachers. The burnout rate at one point in time was the average teacher coming into the field would last 3 years.
I couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
What a difficult job that would be.
Yeah, and I know a lot of former teachers that are roughly my age or older. They just like, this is, again, oppressive bureaucracy. I can't get anything done. I have no support. And even their, first line leaders, the principals, felt the same way. Obviously, they're not saying that because that's not how leadership works. But,
Right.
They can't get anything done because they can't beat the system from their frontline views. So they just get out of the system and go do literally anything else. And now we have a qualified teacher with a license in the state of Arkansas not teaching.
I can't blame them. I understand.
Yeah, exactly. So it's,
God bless them. That's all I know to
yeah,
say.
God bless them. I mean, I know how I was as a kid and a lot of my hooligan friends. So,
And it gets a lot worse than that. You
yeah,
know?
yeah, no,
I mean,
the-
so many. Yeah, I mean, from kids, and I don't believe there's such a thing as a bad kid, but I do. I mean, obviously, we know what goes on in these schools, and who knows what we don't know goes on in these schools.
yeah,
In addition to the safety issues that arise from time to time out of there.
Yeah.
Tough stuff. But I do think voters are uneducated on a lot of that stuff. Was my biggest point on some of those things that they have big opinions on, like the LEARNS Act and things
Right.
like that. And they know what they want. And they a lot of the time know that.
yeah, no, and it's obviously you want everyone to know everything about what's going on. You want everyone to be the best read about everything. That's just never going to happen. Let's be honest with ourselves.
We have a lot going on.
There's a lot of going on. The average voter, I've told people this 10,000 times. It's like the average voter is not as mad as you. Otherwise, they would be running themselves. They're not, therefore. And most people are busy working their 9 to 5, raising their 2.8 kids and repainting their white picket fence to make sure it stays nice and sparkly white. They don't start paying attention to this stuff until it becomes intimately relevant to them on a personal level or an election comes around.
Right.
So all this noise that's constantly in the background from people that are wanting to maintain the status quo, constantly bombarding with all this stuff. It's, the average person can't suss it out because they don't have the subject matter expertise to parse apart education policy. And I really don't think it would be a normal thing to be able to do that. I don't
Right.
even know if I can adequately do it.
Right.
And I've been working in this field. So
Right.
it's just what they're doing is bad. Everything is bad. Resist, resist, resist. It's just not an effective way to do it. And there's plenty of members of the super minority that have found ways to work around that and build meaningful relationships and still get things done and will vote with us on some things sometimes because we're doing common sense things. There's obviously partisan fence, left and right side of the fence stuff you can't ever get across, and that's fine. That's why we have parties. But that's not what we're getting out of what we're seeing right now with our current representation. And if it is happening, it's not being shown to anyone. So did it really happen in the first place?
Right. Right. You seem very reasonable, and I find that often. I mean, you're not willing. You're not unwilling to look past the party line. I see that in a lot of the things you say.
Yeah, right and wrong is right and wrong. Like if they're going to do something that disproportionately affects my district in a negative way, I'm not voting with the party.
Right.
If that makes someone in leadership uncomfortable and whatever, even if I have to vote, be the one no vote, I'll vote no. Because at the end of the day, those are the people that sent me there to represent their interests. There's going to be at some point in time where I probably vote the opposite of how I want to because it's the way the people who vote to send me there want me to vote on an issue that is not black and white. But listening to the people and voting that way and bucking the party line if you have to is what responsible leaders do. And I would like to say throughout my career, I've tried to be a responsible leader and definitely surrounded myself with some. So if I have to say something critical of somebody that's got a way cooler title and a much bigger office than me, so be it. I'm going to say it.
Yeah. Good. That's what people want. They want to know that you're going to do the right thing, regardless of uh, inappropriate consequence. Right. Right.
Right. And they want authentic people that are not out
That-
there sloganeering and
Yes.
saying all the things that the national party says and, just being another cog in the machine. They want an authentic person who they think understands their plight as an individual and can then take that plight and understanding and do something with it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what everybody wants. Yeah, so lowering your platform,
Mm.
lowering taxes. Would you like to expound on the remainder?
Yeah, I just think for the most part with taxes, obviously you can't have no taxes, period, because that's just not the way the world works anymore. Once upon a time, before the
Mhm.
U.S. was a superpower, perhaps, but at the end of the day, people always end up in this argument. It's really what defines the two parties: the size, scope, and role of what the government is and what it should be. So our friends across the aisle, the Democrats, seem to always arrive at the conclusion that this is the state's money without any forethought of how did it get there. So with a lot of the mentality of what you see with when the Democrats are proposing things, they always start from an argument of you're taking stuff away from the state. When you see anytime there's a tax cut, the way that they phrase it is how are you going to pay for a tax cut? You don't pay for a tax cut. You fail to collect the money in the first place. You're not paying for
Right.
anything. It's just you're not collecting. But you have to understand that level of mindset and what all comes downstream of believing that way, that the state should have a large size, scope, and role in your personal life and providing services. Should we have Medicaid? Yes, absolutely. For the people that need it the most, who
Sure.
through no fault of their own are disabled, lower income, whatever. Should we have an infinite cap, no cap forever on people staying on benefits forever? Probably not, because it's not beneficial to that human being. But the way that the argument gets framed is it's cruel to want more for someone,
Yeah.
want them to make something of themselves and be a contributing member of society. Are there people that are never able to get there because of, intellectual disability, severe physical disability,
Sure.
whatever it is? Yeah, those people exist, but there's not that many of them.
Right. We
So,
want to help those people.
and we want to
No,
help those
no
people.
question.
That's why the SNAP program exists, federal money for that's run through the state. I don't want kids starving, at all. There's no acceptable scenario in which kids starving in the streets is a good thing. It's just not a thing that we should want to tolerate as civilized society. But using that as a bludgeon to say we should reform none of it
Right.
isn't a valid excuse either.
Right.
So it's like you can take care of the most needy who need it to get back on their feet and you help them to their feet rather than letting them stay dependent on the government forever. But with all the taxes and how much we pay in, it's a lot of people, I think, that got on that first wave of when President Trump was just candidate Trump running. It's the why am I paying so much money every year in taxes to pay for somebody else to sit on the couch?
Yeah.
Uh,
People are tired of that, I believe.
yeah, people are tired of it. And, perhaps some people think it's more of a problem than it actually is. And some people definitely think it's less of a problem than it actually is. But at the end of the day, a government with no money can't do anything to oppress me. So
Right.
the less it is able to do, the more I am able to do in lieu of the government. So it's a torque and acceleration equation of sorts.
Right.
The more the government regulates, the less I am able to do on a nearly one for one basis. So taxes is the vehicle for how you go about restricting the government's ability to move and do things. You can't sit here and overregulate,
And vice versa.
right, and vice
Right.
versa.
Right.
So you can't. The more taxes we continuously pay in to the system, first of all, there's no accountability mechanism at all. Like with a business, if you have a line of, you know, work or whatever that is losing you money, what do you stop
Right.
doing?
Right.
That line of work.
You have a measurement all in business.
Right.
Yes.
But the government can't go bankrupt.
Right.
And we have a balanced budget amendment, which is fortunate. So we can't, continuously borrow on losing bets, which is what the federal government has done to the extent of $38 trillion, I think we're at now. And every president has doubled it in my lifetime, I guess.
I can't even fathom that.
Well, let me rephrase. Shout
Yeah.
out former Governor Clinton for getting us to a temporary budget surplus. It was
Right.
definitely one of the good things he did while he was in office. But, um, there's no incentive to streamline anything in the government because it can't go bankrupt.
Right.
And the people who are impacted by the government losing money on something don't care. If you're a business owner, as you can attest, if you're losing money on something, you stop doing it. The government's just like, whatever.
Right.
Just collect more money. That's why I'm such a big, purist on streamlining things. It's like,
Right.
do we need to provide a certain level of services? Absolutely. People should not be punished for things that are not their fault that they got the way that they are. However, if there's a way to give them a hand up rather than a hand out, let's do it. And if they're going to be, unfortunately, permanently stuck on government dependence, then so be it. But that should not be very many people.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of people support the way that you see that.
Yeah.
In addition to that, as far as your platform, I know that you support veterans, that you've made statements regarding supporting law enforcement and some
Yeah.
changes to infrastructure in the area of West Little Rock. Uh, if you'd like to expound on that, I'd love to hear.
Yeah. No. So obviously, the only people who really understand veterans are veterans themselves. Sort of a corollary to that, if elected, I'll be the only current or former member that I'm aware of the Arkansas National Guard who is regulated by the state legislature. And people don't, even reservists that are like normal Army reservists that are not in the National Guard, don't understand the National Guard. So having that level of insight on the what the Guard can do for you, whether it's from an emergency management straight up tornado blows through the eastern part of House District 75, West Little Rock, jumps over and then cuts right across Camp Robinson and bulldozes another neighborhood. What was the first thing they did? Stood up the National Guard, put them in position, and started restoring order to the area. And the whole process of how that becomes a thing and how we safeguard our state utilizing the guard is not something that anyone really understands other than the guardsmen themselves. So that level of knowing what exactly it is we do around here with one of our largest departments, several thousand Arkansas National Guard members and what they can do for the state, I think I offer that. In addition to just the general understanding what it's like to be a service member, Arkansas is a very heavy veteran presence state.
And I'm surprised to find that we don't have anyone currently in our any of our lawmakers who are active or retired.
So Stetson Painter, friend of mine, used to work for First District at Arkansas on the congressional level. He's an Army reservist. Last I knew, I can't remember what he does for them, but everyone who is a veteran was all active duty, as far as I'm aware. If you look at all
Yeah.
we sit here naming names, so that would take a while, and I don't have them all written down. But
Right.
all the ones that I've talked to, all the ones that I'm familiar with, were all active duty for their entire time or majority of their time. So they don't even understand what's to be a reservist. They just know what it is to be in the military.
Right.
So one thing particular with veterans that grinds my gears that will definitely put into a law up for a vote at some point. I'm sure you're aware if you're 100% permanent and total disabled with the VA, you have your property tax exempted. You know that, right?
Yeah. I did not know that.
So fun fact.
Good to know. Yeah.
So every single year, you have to take a letter that the VA sends you, roughly in January, and take it to the county courthouse or wherever they have the real estate services and say, "Here's my letter, exempt my property taxes." They have to manually input a transaction to do that, so they don't charge you. It's in the name, permanent and total. What would you suggest that might mean?
Right. Well, like maybe we don't need to do it again next year.
Correct, because it's never going to
Right.
change unless there's a fraud investigation and your name is in the newspaper because they arrested you for VA fraud. So, and I ran into this with one of the counties from my professional existence where they kept having this issue with veterans that go in there. It's like, I've tried and they keep charging me. There's no database for who all has this.
Right.
So you could literally stop this inputting step in the first quarter of every year. You just have a database that's opt-in. There's people obviously never want to be in a database ever. And after my time in the Army, I understand.
Right.
But if you don't want to go down to the county courthouse every single year, be on file and they just stop charging you. And whenever you move, guess what? That follows you throughout the state of Arkansas. It's a statewide basis. And the person who buys your house, if they are not eligible, obviously won't have it on their file. So it won't be tied to that deed anymore.
Yeah. Right.
So it's
Tied to them.
yeah, it's a self-correcting system. And it's something that's so small and it shouldn't matter. But it's the principle of the matter is that if you're 100% permanent and total, you have to be pretty dang jacked up.
Right.
Because, with how the VA rates things.
Like you earned it.
You earned it. It is very hard to get 100% permanent and total by just getting nickel and dimed and stacking up enough broken systems in your body. Usually it's a pretty traumatic injury or a lot of
Right.
mental health stuff. And you're making them do all this extra step for a thing that's never going to change. They will always be permanent and total. It's in the name.
Right.
Because you can be 100% not permanent and total. You can be at a individual unemployability, I think it's called, IU, where you effectively become 100, but it's reviewed every year. You're 100% permanent total. It's never changing.
Right.
We can literally fix this whenever we want to. We just have to create a legislative vessel to make it possible.
Yeah.
And then if people don't want to do it, and I'm the only person, I'm not 100% if I ever become permanent and total, probably won't happen. But if it did, if I'm the only person in there, so be it. We at least gave people the option, not
Right.
waste however much time driving down to the courthouse to make this happen.
Right.
And it's those little things. You hit enough singles, you win a baseball game.
Right.
Not everything has to be a home run.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know that. And just speaks to one more, everybody's aware of how inefficient government is
Right.
as a whole, right?
Right. And you'd made mention about law enforcement. Obviously, I'm supportive of having law and order because in the absence of police officers, we get chaos. You see it everywhere whenever the cops back off, whether because they were told to stand down by their hires, whatever means, or they're just completely overwhelmed. People, negative actors step into the space. And being a cop, kind of like being a teacher the last few years, being a cop in the post, COVID world, got to be up there with one of the hardest jobs out there because everything you do is scrutinized. Everything you do is in the fishbowl effect, as they call it, where you're just a little fishy swimming around and everyone's watching because it's a clear, everyone can see you. And I think that the National Democrats in particular, including my opponent, have really honed in on the all cops are bad thing. Whether they say it overtly, they talk about defunding police organizations, they talk about the need for body cams that's going to expose all these rotten cops. Well, it actually ends up benefiting police officers more often than it hurts them from what I've seen by the numbers. There should be nothing politically charged. It should be an apolitical field, just like the military. I mean, heck, I don't even know if sheriffs should run as Republicans and Democrats. It should all be independents in my view. But the attack on law enforcement, both by administrative malfeasance and other ways of slowly pulling at the threads, make it not effectively work. I mean, it's just, you're leaving people out on the streets waiting to go for multiple felonies, go to trial, but they keep getting released because it's just conveyor belt revolving door in and out of county jails because they're overcrowded. And the law enforcement that's out there, I have several friends that are cops around here. They know these guys when they rearrest them for the 10th time. So whether or not they got charged for everything they were arrested for, not so much because they declined to prosecute because it's so small. The whole system doesn't work right now. And the constant resist, we're not going to do anything about it. The status quo works fine for me. All things that the governor comes up with are bad crowd. I put my opponent into that crowd for most issues. We can't continue to accept this. It's not benefiting the people that are paying the taxes. In a lot of instances, it's not benefiting the people that are committing the crimes because they're literally one institutionalization away from changing their life and getting back on the straight and narrow and off substances and back on mental health
I think
treatment.
people fail to see that point right there that you're making often. I think both sides fail to see that a lot of the time when you arrest someone and it's either viewed as punishment or but there people are coming out of jail or prison oftentimes and looking back at what they did and saying, man, I'm never going to do that again.
Right.
You're helping someone a lot of the time when you lock them up as a police officer.
And there's a lot of, there's a lot of programs that are out there. They're supposed to be able to, pass a GED by the time they come out of a long stretch, which doesn't really happen from what I've gathered. And there's a lot of things we can do, but reentry programs, Governor Hutchinson really worked on this a lot. And then for whatever reason, it just didn't get implemented correctly. And they've lost over half the capacity they had for reentry programs, which are documented to work. You give a guy who's a good candidate to not reoffend, you give them a year running head start or 6-month head start, whatever it is, and put them into a real world environment under intense control. You're not wearing the funny suits and bracelets anymore, but you're watched and scrutinized and drug tested. You get all of your documents, so you're not going out there with nothing, and you work at a job for 6 months. Pay rent, get used to functioning as a person on the outside again.
Right.
And then those people are half as likely to go back to jail.
Right.
So again, you hit enough singles, you eventually score some runs. We can fix things about this and get people out of our overcrowded jails and out of the streets, becoming law enforcement perennial offenders. I mean, it's like literally they make jokes about people they know. It's like, oh, wow, Mr. Bobby again. Good to see you, Bobby. How you doing today? Get out of the street. It's they know most of these perennial serial offenders.
Yeah.
So if you're arresting the same guy over and over again and he's not going to jail and he's not stopping his behavior, what is it they're doing? Are they
Yeah.
just babysitters with badges and guns at this point? I mean, it doesn't work.
Sometimes I feel like that's what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people trying to do good work. I'm not going to sit here and armchair quarterback and say the sheriff,
Yeah.
sucks and he's terrible and whatever because I've known the guy. I've had a few conversations with. I'm not going to say that the police chief. I've talked to him a few times. I know the guy. They're doing what they can with what they have. So we need to give them more so that they aren't continuously making decisions based on what they have. They don't have enough. That's why we continue to have the problem. So anyone who just blunt force trauma goes at it from one way is like, oh, these people are bad because they're on blue team. That's not helpful.
Right.
Oh, these people are bad because they're on red team. That's not helpful. Like, let's have some problem solvers that want to innovate and do some right by these people. And there's some people that frankly just don't need to be part of society.
Sure.
I mean, there's
Sure.
some people that are so broke in the brain, they have no desire to change, whether they're, got some sociopathic tendencies to them or they're just frankly not a
Right.
good person. They don't need to be out here with the rest of us. Those people need to be punished and sent away for a long time.
Absolutely.
But if there's even a slightest hint of the faintest whiff, the chance that someone can be rehabilitated and put back into normal society, then let's give them all the tools to succeed and watch them try.
Right. Absolutely. We owe that to them and society
Right.
to give them an opportunity.
I would want it afforded to me, so I'm going to afford it to you.
Sure.
So,
I don't know how those aren't bipartisan viewpoints. That everyone will.
right. Yeah, I think there's some on the red side of the aisle that have gotten too over the skis on the punitive aspect. And
Sure.
people should be punished for doing the wrong thing.
Sure.
Like that's when my daughter eventually tells a little fib, she's not going to have a good day. Like I'm not for
Right.
just give them cookies and glass of milk and say, attaboy champ, go try him again. Like I'm not saying that in the
Right.
slightest. But there's a point where you're just being punitive for the sake of being punitive because it makes me feel better.
Right.
Like we're not fixing that person. And the first thing they're going to do, because you're going to get released with no money, no driver's license, no social security card, just be like, smack on the butt, attaboy champ, go get them.
Good luck.
Good
Yeah.
luck.
Yeah.
Release them back into the same neighborhood they came from, staying at the same house that they stayed at beforehand. Really just putting them back in there. You just
Surrounded by the same problems.
yeah, you took
Right.
5, 10, whatever number of years and months out of their life and just put them right back in the same situation.
Right.
No sane person would come up with that strategy if you were to start from, we have to burn it all down and rebuild it.
Right.
Come up with a strategy to put people back into society. You wouldn't come up with this, but it's what it's turned into.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like everybody should be able to. So let me ask you this. Let's fast forward. You've been in office for 2 years. You're looking at, going back into the next election cycle. How do you look back and say, man, we really moved the needle? What would that look like? We succeeded. 2 years.
Yeah, so obviously you have to win the election in November of this year, so that would be kind of the starting block. But I think that there's a lot of people who file a lot of bills in the legislature to show that they're fighting and then they don't do anything with it. So messaging bills per se, or some lobbying organization or those conglomerates that come up with the cut and paste bills. You want to get a good score with them. So you run this bill and then have no intention of passing it. I'm not into that. It's dumb. It's counterproductive and waste of time and get paper and digital space on the website. So the things that I'm setting out to do, did we pass them? Yes or no? So we'll just use my database for veterans that are 100% permanent in total because it seems like the easiest no-brainer should be pass with 100 on one side, 35 the other. Thank you, Governor Sanders, for your signature. Here we are on implementation. The only metric that matters is did it pass? And if it's not an unequivocal yes because it didn't pass, therefore is a no, and you look at why is it a no? Was I wrong or did we not articulate the issue or is it a not yet because it got bumped off the back end of the schedule or whatever? How do we regroup from that and attack it again? But there's people that go up there and struggle valiantly for session after session after session without getting anything done. Like, oh, well, we sure did try. Like, well, did you really? And if you're that ineffective, why do I keep sending you back? So it's like either your premise is wrong or you can't build a consensus around it. So if the premise is wrong, I challenge your judgment. If you can't build a consensus, I challenge your effectiveness. And I feel as if that's what we had with the current representation is just resist, resist, resist all the wonderful ideas that they've come up with. are not things that are commonly held beliefs at all. In fact, have got on the wrong side of quite a few of the social issues. Voting against putting age verification for access to pornography in the state of Arkansas. Guess who voted no? Not even all the Democratic caucus, but she did. So just
Love
these,
to hear a statement as to why.
yeah, no, and there is no statement that I've seen. You can go back in time and look at, I think it was in 2021, her first session, and Alan Clark ran a bill to basically recock all the judicial stuff with divorces to start with a presumption of 50-50 custody. And she went to the well and spoke against it. So I've personally never been divorced or had a, kid with someone I'm not married to. So I can't speak, from a firsthand perspective. However, as a company commander in the Arkansas Guard, there are some stereotypes that are kind of true about people in the military, and getting divorced and having kids in less than ideal circumstances is one of those that's kind of true, at least in the Arkansas Guard. And I see it all the time. These guys would come in just completely drained because they were paying every dollar, every dime they had, trying to fight for the right to see their kids. There was no presumption that they should have the right to see them half the time.
That's a shame, and kids suffer without fathers. I mean, at the end of the day,
Yeah,
sometimes they suffer if they have the wrong father.
correct. And
But
those do happen, but it's a presumption and a starting block,
yes,
not a final outcome.
right,
Like, you can have someone who's just an absolute piece of crap that has no real need to be around their kids because they're a negative influence.
sure,
The evidence will present itself and they won't win.
right,
There has to be a presumption, though, that it's not, it affects men, but there are situations in which men have, the local know-how. They're the local somebody in their town, and they basically just run
right,
their ex-spouse off the tracks because they can't compete with them with the resources without bankrupting themselves. So the wrong parent gets more custody because there wasn't all these frameworks. Now there is, and she still argued against it. So to take valiantly dying alone on the Hill has no value.
right.
You can find a hill that's worth fighting for, but sitting there and losing on yourself and making a principled stand does not win you brownie points in this game. You have to win, or it doesn't matter. It's the same thing with if I get super close and just don't happen to win, lose by 24 votes or whatever.
You still
Lost. That's the only metric that
You
matters
are
in this game.
100% ineffective.
Yeah. And it's the same thing with building consensus. It's like you can literally see it went to, committee and died, or it went to a House floor vote and died. Like, you can literally see all this stuff. It's completely transparent. So if people can't get their pet projects done or their key legislative issues that they run on every year done, then they need to be replaced.
Yeah, absolutely. You're the man to do it, huh?
I mean, I like to think so. We'll see
Yeah.
what the other District 75 voters have to say the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So,
Yes, sir. Well, if you'd like to say anything to them, I'd like to give you this moment. You go ahead, please.
yeah.
Your voters.
So I would say that politics has become entirely too nationalized just in my voting lifetime. My first election was in 2012. I remember it well. Ever since then, things have become overly nationalized and not about state issues. I'm not running to be somebody in the party. I don't have any interest in that. My opponent, nobody made her be a DNC delegate. Nobody made her take all the national stances and vote with them nearly 100% of the time. I'm running to be an individual who happens to be a Republican, not a Democrat who happens to be a representative. I'm running because I came from the neighborhoods that I'm running to represent. I'm like most of you. We have a lot of similarities, and I'm willing to talk to anyone about anything, no matter what it is, any time of day, to try and find a solution to a problem that you might have. We can't win. I will tell you to your face, we are not going to be able to do that. Here's how I think we should go about it. If you have an issue with the state agency, I'm going to be there to figure out how to solve the problem. It's what I've done on the federal side for many years, and will continue that service by doing state casework, whether it's your tax returns not coming back, you're having an issue with the DMV, whatever it is. I know how these systems work. I've seen their federal corollaries. I've worked with the state staff. I know how to solve problems at the individual level to make your life better, and try to change legislation to make it to where the government is a less oppressive force in your life and you have more freedom to choose what you.
Hunter, uh, I've learned a lot sitting here with you. It's been enlightening. And I would say you've got a real bright future in front of you. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with this election and the rest of you. Really appreciate you sitting down with us today.
Thanks for having me today. It's a good opportunity to have my first podcast interview.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I didn't know this was your first podcast. Well, write that down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
look forward to having another one in the future with you and looking back on some of these things.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.